Some mornings change your life forever, and Daniel Reeve started like any other. At 42, the former Army medic had finally found peace in the quiet mountains of West Virginia, far from the memories that once haunted his sleep. When he woke up with his cheek swollen and burning, Daniel thought it was just a bug bite. A quick visit to the doctor would fix it. But what Dr. Sarah Chen discovered under his skin left them both speechless. Parasitic larvae. Living creatures writhing beneath the surface dot as Daniel stared at the X-ray. Buried memories from a classified mission began to surface. The sealed files. The cover-ups. The experimental weapon that was supposed to stay secret forever. Now 15 years later, something was waking up inside him. But why now? And who else knows he's still alive? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to the Appalachian ridges like a familiar embrace, wrapping around Daniel Reeve's cabin in layers of gray and silver. He'd chosen this place 3 years ago for its isolation, a weathered log structure perched on a ridge, where the nearest neighbor lived 5 miles down a winding dirt road. The realtor had warned him about the winters, the spotty cell service, the 40-minute drive to the closest town. Daniel had signed the papers that same afternoon. His old military medical kit sat forgotten in the bedroom closet, buried beneath wool blankets and moth-eaten sweaters. The black canvas bag had once been his lifeline, packed with tourniquets, morphine, and battlefield dressings that had saved more lives than he cared to count. Now it gathered dust, a relic from a life he'd deliberately left behind. The swelling on his left cheek had worsened overnight. What started as a small, tender spot had grown into an angry red patch the size of a silver dollar. Daniel pressed his fingers against it gingerly, feeling the heat radiating through his skin. The burning sensation made him wince sharper and more persistent than any insect bite he'd ever experienced. He'd seen enough field injuries to know this wasn't normal. The edges were too defined, the inflammation too severe. Something was wrong, but Daniel had spent the last 3 years avoiding doctors, hospitals, and anyone who might ask too many questions about his military service. The drive to Cedar Ridge Medical Center took 43 minutes along mountain roads that twisted through forests of oak and pine. Daniel had made this journey only twice before, once for a tetanus shot after cutting himself on rusted barbed wire, and once for a prescription refill when his VA benefits had been delayed. Both visits had been brief, professional encounters with Dr. Martinez, an older physician who respected patient privacy and didn't pry into personal histories. Dr. Martinez had retired last month. His replacement was Dr. Sarah Chen, a woman in her late 30s with keen dark eyes and the kind of focused intensity that came from years of emergency medicine. Daniel had heard about her from Tom Fletcher at the hardware store. Apparently, she'd moved from Baltimore after her husband's death, seeking the same kind of quiet refuge that had drawn Daniel to these mountains. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant and old magazines. Daniel sat in a corner chair, his baseball cap pulled low, watching other patients with the hypervigilance that had never quite left him. An elderly farmer with a bandaged hand, a young mother bouncing a feverish toddler. Normal people with normal problems. Daniel Reeve? Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. She was smaller than he'd expected, but her handshake was firm when she greeted him. "I'm Dr. Chen. What brings you in today?" Her office was sparse but warm, with framed photographs of mountain landscapes and a small succulent garden on the windowsill. Daniel settled into the patient chair, suddenly conscious of how long it had been since he'd talked to another person about anything more substantial than weather or hardware supplies. "Woke up with this yesterday morning," he said, tilting his face toward the light. "Thought it might be a spider bite, but it's getting worse." Dr. Chen leaned forward, her expression shifting from routine concern to focused attention as she examined the swelling. She put on magnifying glasses and studied the affected area closely, occasionally asking him to turn his head or open his mouth. Any fever? Nausea? Changes in vision or hearing? No fever. Maybe a little tired, but I haven't been sleeping well. She made notes on her chart, then looked up at him with thoughtful eyes. Mr. Reeve, this doesn't look like any spider bite I've seen. The pattern of inflammation is unusual. I'd like to do some blood work and take a few images, if that's all right with you. Daniel hesitated. Blood work meant databases, medical records, potential flags and systems he'd spent years avoiding. But the burning in his cheek was getting worse, and Dr. Chen's expression suggested this wasn't a request he should ignore. What kind of images? Ultrasound first, maybe an X-ray if we need to see deeper structures. I want to rule out any foreign objects or underlying infection. 20 minutes later, Daniel found himself lying on an examination table while Dr. Chen moved an ultrasound wand across his cheek. The gel was cold against his skin, and the machine's electronic beeping filled the small room. He watched her face carefully, noting the way her brow furrowed as she studied the screen. Interesting, she murmured, adjusting the wand's position. Mr. Reeve, have you ever been exposed to any unusual chemicals or biological agents? In your work, perhaps? The question hit him like ice water. Daniel's military service had ended 15 years ago, but certain training never left you. The way her voice had changed, becoming more careful, more clinical. The way she was looking at him now, not like a routine patient, but like a puzzle she needed to solve. I was in the Army, he said carefully. Field medic, standard deployment stuff. Dr. Chen nodded, but her eyes remained focused on the ultrasound screen. I see some unusual tissue density here, almost like there are small objects beneath the skin. Foreign bodies of some kind. What kind of foreign bodies? She saved images from the screen, then set the wand aside. I'd like to take some X-rays for a better look. This may be nothing, but I want to be thorough. The X-ray room was cold and sterile, filled with the familiar hum of medical equipment. Daniel had been X-rayed dozens of times during his military service, after training accidents, combat injuries, routine physicals. But this felt different. More invasive somehow, as if the machine might reveal secrets he'd buried along with his service records. Dr. Chen returned 20 minutes later with developed films in hand. She clipped them to a light board and studied them in silence, her expression growing increasingly troubled. Mr. Reeve, she said finally, I need to ask you some very specific questions, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Daniel's mouth went dry. What did you find? She pointed to several small dog shapes visible on the X-ray. These appear to be some kind of parasitic larvae. Multiple specimens embedded in the subcutaneous tissue. They're organized in a pattern that suggests deliberate placement rather than accidental infection. The words hit him like physical blows. Parasitic larvae. Deliberate placement. The room seemed to tilt slightly, and Daniel gripped the arms of his chair to steady himself. That's impossible, he said. But even as the words left his mouth, fragments of memory began stirring. A laboratory. Screaming. The acrid smell of burning chemicals. Dr. Chen's voice seemed to come from very far away. Mr. Reeve, these organisms are unlike anything I've seen in standard medical literature. The tissue response suggests they've been there for years, possibly decades, in some kind of dormant state. Have you experienced any unusual symptoms recently? Changes in physical capacity, sensory perception, healing rates? Daniel couldn't answer. The memories were coming faster now, breaking through the walls he'd built to contain them. Eastern Europe. The facility hidden in the Carpathian Mountains. Operation Nightshade. The mission that had officially never happened. I need to make some calls, Dr. Chen continued. Consult with specialists who might have experience with this type of condition. In the meantime, I'm going to prescribe some antibiotics and anti-inflammatory medication to manage the local reaction." "No," Daniel said sharply, standing up so quickly that his chair rolled backward. "No calls, no consultations." Dr. Chen looked startled by his sudden intensity. "Mr. Reeve, this is a serious medical condition that requires. I understand what it requires." Daniel's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions under pressure. "But no calls. Not yet. Give me 24 hours." She studied his face for a long moment, clearly torn between medical protocol and some instinct that told her this patient's situation was more complicated than standard practice could handle. "Mr. Reeve, if these organisms become active, they won't. Not in 24 hours. He wasn't sure how he knew that, but the certainty was absolute. "I need time to process this, to make some inquiries of my own." Dr. Chen nodded slowly, though her expression remained troubled. 24 hours. But if your symptoms worsen, any fever, difficulty breathing, changes in neurological function, you come back immediately. And I mean immediately. Daniel was already moving toward the door. "Thank you, Dr. Chen, for being thorough, for being discreet." She handed him a prescription slip and a business card with her personal cell phone number written on the back. "Call me if you need anything, day or night." The drive home passed in a blur of mountain scenery and half-remembered horrors. By the time Daniel reached his cabin, the sun was setting behind the western ridges, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. He sat in his truck for several minutes, staring at the place that had been his sanctuary for 3 years. Everything had changed in the space of a single afternoon. The peaceful life he built was revealed as an illusion, a temporary reprieve from something that had been waiting inside him all along. The burning in his cheek seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, a constant reminder that his past had finally caught up with him. Daniel climbed the steps to his front porch and paused with his hand on the door handle. Tomorrow he would have to dig into memories he'd spent 15 years trying to forget. He would have to face the truth about Operation Nightshade and whatever had been done to him in that underground laboratory. But tonight, for just a few more hours, he could pretend that he was still just a former medic living quietly in the mountains, that the creatures stirring beneath his skin were just a medical anomaly that could be treated with antibiotics and rest. The illusion wouldn't last much longer, but it was all he had left. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table with Dr. Chen's X-ray film spread before him, studying the alien shapes embedded beneath his skin by the light of a kerosene lamp. The power in his cabin worked fine, but the softer glow of the flame felt less invasive somehow, less clinical than the harsh fluorescent bulbs that had illuminated too many field hospitals and medical tents. The larvae, if that's what they truly were, appeared as dark crescents scattered across the film like a constellation of nightmares. 12 distinct shapes, each roughly the size of a grain of rice, distributed in a pattern that seemed almost geometric in its precision. Dr. Chen had been right about the deliberate placement. This wasn't the result of some tropical parasite or contaminated food. This was intentional dot by dawn. The burning sensation had spread from his cheek down along his jawline. Daniel touched the area gingerly and felt a network of raised lines beneath the skin, like tiny roadways branching out from the original swelling. The pattern reminded him of something circuit boards, maybe, or the root system of some underground fungus. He made coffee and tried to force his mind back to Eastern Europe, to the winter of 2009 when his Special Forces medical unit had been deployed to a facility that didn't exist on any official maps. The memories came in fragments, disconnected scenes that his mind had apparently worked very hard to suppress. Snow falling on concrete bunkers, the smell of industrial disinfectant, mixed with something else, something organic and wrong. Screaming that came from underground, echoing up through ventilation shafts, and the man in the white coat who had assured them that the exposure had been minimal contained nothing to worry about. Dr. Alexei Petrov. That was his name. A Russian biochemist who spoke perfect English and claimed to be working with NATO to contain a Soviet-era biological weapons program. Daniel remembered the man's pale eyes and the way his hands never stopped trembling, as if he were constantly fighting off some inner chill. The facility had been destroyed 3 days later. An accidental explosion that leveled 6 acres of forest and left nothing but a smoking crater where the laboratories had been. Daniel's team had been evacuated 12 hours before the blast, flown to a military hospital in Germany, where they'd undergone 2 weeks of medical observation and psychological debriefing. All routine, they'd been told. Standard protocol for potential exposure to unknown agents. The blood tests had come back clean. The physical examinations had revealed no abnormalities. One by one, the team members had been cleared for return to active duty, their records sealed. Under national security classifications, Daniel poured another cup of coffee and tried to remember his teammates' names. Rodriguez, the demolitions expert from Texas who joined the army to pay for college. Kim, the sniper from Seattle who collected vintage baseball cards and spoke 4 languages. Patterson, their squad leader, a career soldier who'd planned to retire to a fishing cabin in Minnesota. How many of them were still alive? How many had woken up one morning with burning patches on their skin and dark crescents swimming beneath the surface? The telephone rang, startling Daniel out of his memories. He almost didn't answer. Very few people had his number, and most calls these days were from telemarketers or wrong numbers. But something made him pick up the receiver on the 4th ring. "Daniel, it's Sarah Chen." Her voice was tight with tension, nothing like the calm professionalism she'd displayed at the clinic. Daniel immediately went on alert. "Dr. Chen, it's early for a medical follow-up. I've been up all night researching your condition. Daniel, I need to see you again. Today. Can you come in? What did you find?" A pause. Then, "I can't discuss it over the phone. Please, just come in. There's something you need to see." Daniel was already reaching for his keys. "I'll be there in an hour." The drive to Cedar Ridge seemed to take forever. Every curve in the mountain road revealed new anxieties, new possibilities for what Dr. Chen might have discovered. Had she contacted other specialists despite his request for discretion? Had she found similar cases in the medical literature? Had she somehow connected his condition to his military service? Dr. Chen was waiting for him in her office, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. She gestured for him to sit, then pulled out a thick folder filled with printed pages and medical images. "I spent the night searching through databases of tropical diseases, parasitology journals, anything that might explain what's happening to you," she began. "I didn't find much, but what I did find is disturbing." She spread several documents across her desk. Daniel saw fragments of medical reports, research abstracts, and what appeared to be declassified military documents. 3 cases in the past 5 years, all military veterans, all presenting with similar subcutaneous organisms and similar patterns of tissue reaction. 1 in Oregon, 1 in North Carolina, 1 in Alaska. Daniel leaned forward, studying the images. The X-rays looked identical to his own. The same crescent-shaped shadows, the same geometric distribution. What happened to them? Dr. Chen's expression darkened. "That's where it gets complicated." The Oregon case was listed as death by heart failure. The North Carolina case was ruled a suicide. The Alaska case... She pulled out a newspaper clipping. "Died in a hunting accident. Shot by an unknown assailant who was never found." The room felt suddenly cold. Daniel stared at the documents, his mind racing through implications and connections. 3 cases. 3 deaths, all within 5 years. "There's more," Dr. Chen continued. I found references to something called Operation Nightshade in some of the declassified materials. It appears to have been a joint NATO research program focused on biological defense. The program was officially terminated in 2010, but there are gaps in the documentation. Missing files, redacted sections. Operation Nightshade. The name hit Daniel like a physical blow, unlocking a flood of suppressed memories. The facility in the Carpathian Mountains. Dr. Petrov shaking hands. The screaming from underground. And afterward, the debriefings, the psychological evaluations, the classified stamps on every piece of paperwork. Dr. Chen, he said carefully, I need you to stop researching this, right now. She looked startled. Daniel, I'm trying to help you. If there's a pattern here, if other people are at risk, if there's a pattern, then the people responsible for it are still out there, and they've already killed at least 3 people to keep it quiet. The weight of that realization settled over both of them. Dr. Chen sat back in her chair, her face pale. You were part of it, weren't you? Operation Nightshade. Daniel nodded. Slowly. I was a field medic attached to a special forces unit. We were sent to secure and assess a Soviet-era biological research facility in Romania. We were told it was a containment mission, that we were preventing weapons-grade materials from falling into the wrong hands. But that's not what happened. No, Daniel touched his cheek, feeling the network of raised lines that had appeared overnight. I think we were the test subjects. I think whatever was in that facility was designed to be used on soldiers. Ernst Luzinju was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications. Finally, she spoke. Daniel, if these organisms have been dormant in your system for 15 years, something has triggered them to become active. We need to figure out what that trigger was, and we need to figure out how to stop the process before I end up like the others. Yes. Daniel stood up, his mind already shifting into tactical mode. The quiet life, the mountain sanctuary, the illusion of safety, all of it was over now. He was being hunted by people with resources and government backing, people who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill to protect their secrets. Dr. Chen, I need you to delete any records of my visit. Wipe the x-rays, destroy the blood work, remove any trace that I was ever here. I can't do that. These are medical records, and you need treatment. What I need is to stay alive long. Enough to figure out what was done to me and how to reverse it. If they find out you've been helping me, you'll become a target too. Dr. Chen stared at him for a moment, then began gathering up the documents and images. What are you going to do? I'm going to find the other survivors, if there are any. And I'm going to get some answers about what really happened in Romania. He moved toward the door, then paused. Dr. Chen Sarah, thank you for being thorough, for not just dismissing this as a routine infection. Be careful, Daniel. Whatever they put inside you, it's changing. The tissue response patterns suggest accelerated healing and enhanced cellular activity. You may be stronger than you think, but you're also more visible. Daniel nodded and left the clinic, knowing he might never see Dr. Chen again. As he walked across the parking lot to his truck, he could feel the organisms beneath his skin pulsing with new energy, as if they were responding to his elevated heart rate and the adrenaline now flooding his system. For 15 years, they had been waiting. Now, they were finally awake. Daniel drove straight home, his mind cataloging everything he would need to retrieve from his carefully buried past. The military medical kit was the first priority, not for the medical supplies, which were probably expired by now, but for the small waterproof pouch sewn into the bottom lining. He'd hidden it there before his discharge. Insurance against a future he'd hoped would never come. Back at the cabin, Daniel pulled the black canvas bag from his closet and set it on the bed. The familiar weight brought back muscle memories of carrying wounded soldiers across muddy battlefields, of working by flashlight to stop arterial bleeding while mortar fell around them. He unzipped the main compartment and began removing the old supplies, bandages, antiseptics, morphine auto-injectors that had long since expired. At the bottom, his fingers found the hidden zipper. Inside the waterproof pouch was a manila envelope containing documents he'd managed to copy before his unit's debriefing, medical records, operational reports, and most importantly, a partially burned fragment of a classified file he'd pulled from a wastebasket in the Romanian facility. The paper was yellow with age, edges charred, but the text was still legible in places. Operation Nightshade Phase 3 Human Trials was stamped across the top in red letters. Below that, handwritten notes in what looked like Dr. Petrov's spidery script. Subject integration successful in 47% of test group. Enhanced healing response documented in surviving specimens. Recommend proceeding to Phase 4 deployment protocols. Daniel's hands trembled as he read the words. Test group. Surviving specimens. They hadn't been soldiers on a rescue mission. They had been lab rats. More memories surfaced as he studied the document. The medical examinations that had seemed so routine at the time, blood draws, tissue samples, neurological assessments. The injections they'd been given as a precaution against potential contamination. The way Dr. Petrov had smiled when Daniel's squad had volunteered to help evacuate the remaining research materials from the deepest levels of the facility. Daniel set the document aside and picked up his old satellite phone, a ruggedized model that could reach anywhere in the world. He hadn't used it in 3 years, but the battery still held a charge. His first call was to Rodriguez in San Antonio. The number had been disconnected. Kim's number in Seattle led to a recording saying the subscriber was no longer in service. Patterson's contact in Minnesota went straight to voicemail, not an answering machine, but the generic message that meant the phone had been dead for weeks or months. Daniel tried 2 more numbers from his contact list, then stopped. Either his entire squad was avoiding their old communication channels, or something had happened to all of them. Given what Dr. Chen had discovered about the 3 dead veterans, Daniel was beginning to suspect the worst. But there was one more resource he could try. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had been their unit's intelligence liaison, responsible for coordinating with higher command and managing classified information. If anyone would know what had happened to the other survivors, it would be Maria. Her number was answered on the second ring. Santos. The voice was older, more careful than Daniel remembered, but unmistakably hers. Maria, it's Daniel Reeve. Long pause. Then, in a whisper, Jesus Christ, Danny. Where are you calling from? Does it matter? Everything matters now. Are you somewhere safe? For the moment? Maria, I need to know about the others. Rodriguez, Kim, Patterson. They're dead, Danny. All of them. Rodriguez died 2 years ago. Kim last year. Patterson 3 months ago. Natural causes, according to their death certificates, but we both know better. Daniel closed his eyes, grief and anger warring in his chest. How many of us are left? As far as I know? Just you, me, and maybe Jackson, if he's still alive. I lost contact with him 6 months ago. Jackson. Daniel barely remembered him, a communications specialist who joined their unit just before the Romania deployment. Quiet, competent, the kind of soldier who did his job without drawing attention. Maria, something's happening to me. The organisms they put in us, they're becoming active. I know. Mine started 3 weeks ago. Started with a headache, then the burning sensation. Then she paused, and Daniel heard what sounded like papers rustling. Danny, I found some of the original research files. What they did to us, it wasn't just an experiment. It was a weapons program. They were trying to create enhanced soldiers, super soldiers who could heal faster, think quicker, fight longer. Did it work? That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? I've been monitoring my vital signs, documenting the changes. My resting heart rate has dropped 10 beats per minute. My reaction time has improved by 15%. Yesterday, I cut myself on a broken glass, and the wound closed in less than an hour. Daniel touched his cheek, where the burning had now spread in intricate patterns down his neck. The side effects? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The original test subjects, the ones before us, most of them died within weeks of activation. But the few who survived became something else. Something beyond human. What happened to them? According to the files, they were terminated. All of them. The program was shut down because they couldn't control what they'd created. Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. They're going to try to terminate us too. They already are. Danny, you need to disappear. Tonight. Don't go home. Don't use credit cards. Don't contact anyone you care about. They have resources we can't imagine. What about Jackson? He was smart. Went off-grid months ago when he started putting the pieces together. If he's still alive, he's probably holed up somewhere in Alaska or Canada, living under a false identity. Daniel was already moving, pulling clothes from his dresser and stuffing them into a duffel bag. Survival mode. The same instincts that had kept him alive in combat zones around the world. Maria, where are you now? Better you don't know. But Danny, if you make it through the next few weeks, if you can stay ahead of them long enough for the process to complete, you might actually have a chance. The enhanced subjects who survived the initial activation became incredibly difficult to kill. Enhanced reflexes, accelerated healing, almost supernatural awareness of danger. At what cost? That's what I'm afraid to find out. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Maria spoke again, her voice heavy with fatigue and fear. Danny, there's something else. I've been monitoring government communication channels, and there's been chatter about a containment operation. Codename Cleanup Protocol. They're not just hunting the survivors. They're hunting anyone who might have knowledge of the program. Researchers, support staff, even family members of the original test subjects. Daniel thought about Dr. Chen, about the night she'd spent researching his condition. Had she inadvertently put herself on their radar? How long do we have? Hours, maybe days. They're mobilizing assets, bringing in contractors who specialize in this kind of work. Military-trained, well-equipped, and completely expendable if things go wrong. Daniel shouldered his duffel bag and grabbed the satellite phone. Maria, stay alive. We may be the only ones left who know the truth about what they did. You too, Danny. And remember, whatever you're becoming, don't fight it. The subjects who tried to suppress the changes died first. The ones who embraced them had a chance. The line went dead. Daniel stood in his cabin for a moment, looking around at the place that had been his sanctuary for 3 years. The peaceful life was over. Now came the hardest part, staying alive long enough to understand what he was becoming. And maybe, if he was very lucky, finding a way to make the people responsible pay for what they'd done. He could feel the organisms beneath his skin responding to his elevated stress levels, pulsing with new energy. Whatever process had begun, there was no stopping it now. Daniel left the cabin as the sun disappeared behind the western ridges, driving his pickup truck along back roads he'd learned during 3 years of solitary exploration. He needed to reach Maria's last known location, a cabin she'd mentioned, near Beckley, 2 hours south through mountain passes that would be difficult to monitor. But first, he had to retrieve something from his past that might give him an edge, hidden in a storage unit outside of Lewisburg was a footlocker he'd rented, under a false name after his discharge. Inside were items that officially didn't exist: night vision goggles, encrypted communication equipment, and a faded photograph of his Special Forces unit taken 2 weeks before the Romania deployment. The photo showed 8 soldiers in combat fatigues, their faces young and confident. Daniel studied each face in the dim light of the storage unit. trying to remember their names, their stories, their dreams for after the war. Rodriguez had planned to become a teacher. Kim wanted to start a security consulting business. Patterson had talked endlessly about the fishing cabin he would buy in Minnesota. 7 of the 8 faces in the photograph were now crossed out with red ink marks. Daniel had made each time he'd learned of another death. Only his own face remained unmarked, staring back at him with the naive confidence of a man who believed his government would never deliberately sacrifice his life for an experiment. Underneath the photograph was a manila folder containing intelligence, reports and personnel files that Maria had helped him copy before their unit's debrief. Most of the information was routine deployment schedules, medical records, performance evaluations. But buried in the bureaucratic paperwork were hints of something larger. Dr. Alexei Petrov hadn't been just any Russian biochemist. According to his file, he was the lead researcher on Project BIOS, a Soviet program that had attempted to create enhanced soldiers during the Cold War. The program had been officially terminated in 1989, but Petrov had continued his research in private facilities scattered across Eastern Europe. The facility in Romania had been his final laboratory, funded through a network of shell companies that traced back to defense contractors in the United States, Britain, and France. Operation Nightshade hadn't been a containment mission. It had been a test run, using American soldiers as unwitting subjects for Petrov's perfected enhancement process. Daniel closed the folder and loaded his equipment into the truck. The burning sensation in his cheek had now spread down his neck and across his shoulder, creating a network of raised lines that felt warm to the touch. When he looked in the rearview mirror, he could see faint patterns glowing beneath his skin, like circuitry powered by his own bioelectricity. The drive to Beckley took him through small mountain towns where pickup trucks gathered outside dyers and gas stations. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that experimental super soldiers were being hunted through their quiet communities. Daniel envied them their ignorance, even as he recognized that his presence put them in danger. Maria's cabin was located on a dirt road that branched off Highway 19, hidden among thick stands of pine and oak. Daniel parked a half-mile away and approached on foot, using night vision goggles to scan for surveillance equipment or signs of disturbance. The cabin was dark, but smoke rose from the chimney. Daniel circled the building twice before approaching the front door, noting the defensive preparations Maria had made: motion sensors, security cameras, and what appeared to be explosive charges rigged to the windows and back door. "Danny?" A voice came from inside before he could knock. "You're 3 minutes late." The door opened to reveal Maria Santos, though she looked nothing like the efficient intelligence sergeant Daniel remembered. Her hair was now streaked with premature gray, and her face was marked by the same network of raised lines that Daniel could feel spreading across his own skin. But her eyes were different, sharper, more aware, as if she could perceive details that normal vision would miss. "You look like hell," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. "You too, but different somehow." The cabin's interior was Spartan, but organized with military precision. Maps covered one wall, marked with red pins indicating the locations where their former teammates had died. A desk near the window held multiple computers and communication equipment, their screens displaying streams of government communication intercepts and news feeds. "I've been monitoring their operations," Maria explained, gesturing toward the equipment. "They're calling it cleanup protocol, and it's bigger than we thought. They're not just hunting the survivors from our unit. They're eliminating anyone connected to the bioweapon program. Researchers, support staff, even family members who might ask uncomfortable questions." Daniel studied the map on the wall. The red pins formed a pattern that stretched across the continental United States, with clusters in areas where defense contractors had major facilities. How many people are we talking about? At least 50 over the past 5 years. Made to look like accidents, suicides, random crimes. But the pattern is clear once you know what to look for. Maria pointed to a computer screen showing a news article about a house fire in Nevada. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, who worked on biological defense projects at Fort Detrick, died in her sleep from smoke inhalation 3 months ago. Her house was completely destroyed, along with all her research materials. Another screen showed an obituary for a man named Thomas Chen, described as a retired military contractor who had died in a car accident in Oregon. Daniel recognized the name from some of the personnel files in his storage unit. They're being systematic about it, Maria continued, working through lists, eliminating anyone who might have knowledge of what really happened in Romania. What about Jackson? Any word from him? Maria shook her head. Radio silence for 6 months. Either he's deeper underground than we are, or she left the sentence unfinished. Daniel walked to the map and studied the pattern of deaths. Maria, have you noticed any changes? I mean, beyond the physical symptoms? What kind of changes? Enhanced abilities, faster reflexes, improved healing, heightened senses. Maria was quiet for a moment, then walked to a cabinet and removed a throwing knife. Without warning, she hurled it directly at Daniel's chest. His hand moved before his mind could process the threat, snatching the blade out of the air 2 inches from his heart. The motion was impossibly fast, guided by reflexes that shouldn't have existed. "Son of a bitch," Daniel whispered, staring at the knife in his hand. "My reaction time has improved by 40%, Maria said calmly. "I can see in near total darkness. Yesterday, I heard a car engine from 3 miles away. And this morning, I watched a shallow cut on my arm heal completely in less than 20 minutes. Daniel set the knife on the table, his mind racing through the implications. We're becoming something else. The question is whether we can stay human enough to maintain our sanity. The original test subjects, the ones from Petrov's early experiments, they became psychotic. Enhanced physical capabilities. But they lost their connection to human empathy, human morality. Is that what happened to the ones they terminated? According to the files, yes, they became predators. Efficient killers with no regard for collateral damage. The program was shut down because they couldn't be controlled. Daniel thought about the burning patterns spreading across his skin, the way his senses seemed to be expanding beyond normal human limits. How long do we have before we lose ourselves? I don't know. The process seems to be accelerating in both of us. Maybe days, maybe weeks. Maria pulled out a chair and gestured for Daniel to sit. "Danny, there's something else. I've been in contact with someone who might be able to help us understand what's happening." "Who?" "A doctor who worked on the original cleanup of the Romanian facility. She's been living under witness protection for 15 years, but she reached out to me after she heard about the recent deaths. Apparently, she's been developing some kind of treatment, maybe even a cure." Daniel felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. Where is she? That's the complicated part. She's been hiding in plain sight, working as a small-town physician, under an assumed identity. But if we contact her, we'll be putting her at risk. More risk than she's already in. Maria nodded toward one of her computer screens, which displayed a news report about a medical clinic that had burned down in Montana. Dr. Richard Sterling, who performed some of the post-mission medical examinations on our unit, died in the fire along with all his patient records. Daniel studied Maria's face, noting the way the raised lines beneath her skin seemed to pulse with faint light when she was under stress. Whatever they were becoming, it was accelerating. "Maria, we're running out of time. If this doctor has information that can help us, we need to find her before the cleanup teams do." "I know. I've been trying to work up the courage to make contact for weeks. But Danny, once we reach out to her, there's no going back. We'll be putting her life in danger, and we'll be committing ourselves to a path that might lead to our own destruction. Daniel thought about Dr. Chen, about the risk she'd already taken by researching his condition. How many innocent people would die to protect the secret of Operation Nightshade? What's her name? Dr. Sarah Chen. She's been working at a clinic in West Virginia. Daniel's blood went cold. Maria, that's the doctor who diagnosed my condition. She's the one who discovered the organisms. Maria stared at him, her enhanced vision picking up details in his expression that normal eyes would miss. Then she already knows, and if she knows, they'll be coming for her soon. Daniel was already moving toward the door. We have to warn her tonight. Danny, if we go back there, we'll be walking into a trap. If we don't go back there, an innocent woman dies because she tried to help me. Maria looked at him for a long moment, then began gathering equipment from her desk. Then we better make sure we're ready for whatever they throw at us. As they prepared to leave, Daniel caught his reflection in a darkened window. The patterns beneath his skin were glowing more brightly now, spreading across his face and neck, like some kind of organic circuitry. He was becoming something beyond human understanding, but he was determined to hold on to his humanity long enough to save the people who had risked everything to help him. The hunt was about to begin in earnest. The drive back to Cedar Ridge took place in 2 vehicles, Daniel in his pickup truck, Maria following in a nondescript sedan equipped with military-grade communication equipment. They maintained radio silence, communicating only through predetermined hand signals when their routes intersected at mountain crossroads. Daniel's enhanced senses were now operating at levels that bordered on overwhelming. He could hear Maria's engine from over a mile behind him, distinguish between different types of birds calling in the forest, even detect the faint scent of wood smoke from cabins hidden deep in the mountain hollows. The organisms beneath his skin pulsed with increasing frequency, their bioluminescent patterns visible even in daylight dawned as they approached Cedar Ridge. Daniel spotted the surveillance immediately. 2 black SUVs parked at strategic points along Main Street, their occupants trying to look casual while monitoring every entrance to the medical center. The cleanup team had arrived faster than expected. Daniel pulled into an abandoned gas station, a quarter-mile from the clinic, and waited for Maria to join him. She emerged from her sedan carrying a tactical backpack and a rifle case, her movements fluid and precise in ways that defied normal human biomechanics. 4 vehicles total, she reported quietly. Professional surveillance pattern. They're not taking any chances. How do we get to Dr. Chen without walking into their crosshairs? Maria opened her backpack and removed what appeared to be a standard USB drive. This contains everything I've gathered about Operation Nightshade. Video files, personnel records, financial documents tracing the funding back to its sources. If something happens to us, at least the truth might survive. Daniel took the drive and secured it in his jacket pocket. Maria, what are we really walking into here? A kill team disguised as a medical emergency response. They'll claim Dr. Chen suffered a heart attack or stroke. Tragic, but natural. Her body will be cremated before anyone can perform an independent autopsy, and her medical records will disappear into classified archives, unless we stop them. They spent 20 minutes studying the surveillance pattern through binoculars, identifying the positions of all 4 vehicles and estimating the number of personnel involved. Daniel counted at least 8 operators, all wearing civilian clothes, but moving with the disciplined coordination of military or intelligence professionals. There's something else, Maria said, lowering her binoculars. I intercepted some of their radio traffic. They're not just here for Dr. Chen. They know about us. This is bait. Daniel felt the organisms beneath his skin respond to his spike in adrenaline, their pulsing patterns accelerating into complex geometries that seemed to map his emotional state. They want us to come, It makes sense from their perspective. Why hunt us separately when they can eliminate all three targets in a single operation? Daniel studied the medical center through his binoculars, noting the subtle signs of preparation: additional security cameras, motion sensors that hadn't been there during his previous visit, and what appeared to be explosive charges placed at key structural points. They're going to destroy the building, he realized. Make it look like a gas leak or electrical fire. Dr. Chen dies in the explosion, along with any inconvenient visitors who might show up to help her. Maria nodded grimly. Efficient and plausibly deniable. No bodies to examine, no evidence to analyze. How long do we have? Based on their positioning and the equipment I observed, I'd guess they're planning to move at sunset. Gives them cover of darkness for the cleanup. Daniel checked his watch. 2 hours until sunset. Not much time to plan an extraction that would keep all three of them alive. Maria, I need you to understand something. Whatever I'm becoming, it's affecting my judgment. I can feel it, the enhanced aggression, the reduced empathy. If I start to lose control during the operation, I'll handle it. I mean it. The original test subjects became predators because they lost their connection to human values. If that happens to me, Danny, shut up and focus on the mission. We save Dr. Chen, we get the hell out of here, and we worry about our evolving psychology later. Daniel nodded, though privately he wondered if they would have enough time. The changes were accelerating in both of them, and he could see the subtle signs of enhanced aggression in Maria's posture, her choice of weapons, the way she assessed potential threats with cold calculation rather than human concern. They spent the next hour developing their approach plan. Maria would create a distraction by triggering the motion sensors on the north side of the building, drawing at least half the surveillance team away from their positions. Daniel would use his enhanced speed and reflexes to reach Dr. Chen's office through the building's rear entrance. The plan was simple, direct, and probably suicidal. But it was better than letting Dr. Chen die for the crime of helping him. As sunset approached, Daniel felt the organisms beneath his skin reaching some kind of critical threshold. The burning sensation had spread across his entire torso, and the bioluminescent patterns were now visible through his clothing. His enhanced senses were detecting details that normal perception couldn't process. The electromagnetic signatures of the surveillance equipment, the chemical traces left by the explosive charges, even the stress hormones emanating from the operatives waiting in their vehicles. Danny, Maria said quietly, look at your hands. Daniel looked down and saw that his fingernails had developed a metallic sheen, as if they were being reinforced with some kind of organic armor. When he flexed his fingers, he could feel new strength in his grip, the kind of crushing force that could snap bones or tear through steel cable. It's happening faster now, Maria observed. The stress is accelerating the process. Are you experiencing the same changes? Maria removed her jacket, revealing arms covered in the same glowing patterns that marked Daniel's skin. But her changes went further. Her muscle definition had increased noticeably, and her eyes now reflected light like those of a nocturnal predator. We're becoming weapons, she said matter-of-factly. The question is whether we can remain human enough to choose our targets wisely. Daniel secured his equipment and checked his watch. Time to move. Maria, if we don't make it through this, we'll make it through this. We have to. We're the only ones left who know the truth. As they prepared to leave their concealed position, Daniel caught sight of his reflection in the side mirror of Maria's sedan. The face staring back at him was recognizably his own, but changed in fundamental ways. His eyes held depths that hadn't existed before, and the patterns glowing beneath his skin gave him an otherworldly appearance that was both beautiful and terrifying. Whatever he was becoming, there was no turning back now. The only choice was to embrace the transformation and hope he could hold on to enough humanity to make the right decisions in the battles ahead. Maria's distraction worked better than planned. The motion sensors triggered a cascade of alarms that sent 6 of the 8 operatives racing toward the north side of the medical center, leaving only 2 guards to monitor the primary entrances. Daniel used his enhanced speed to cross the parking lot in a blur of motion that the remaining surveillance cameras couldn't track. The rear entrance had been secured with electronic locks, but Daniel's transformed fingernails cut through the metal like it was paper. The alarm system should have triggered immediately, but somehow his enhanced senses allowed him to identify and disable the key components before they could alert the monitoring station. Inside the building, Daniel's enhanced hearing picked up Dr. Chen's voice from her office on the 2nd floor. She was speaking quietly to another woman whose voice Daniel didn't recognize. "The patterns are accelerating," Dr. Chen was saying. "Whatever process was initiated 15 years ago, it's reaching some kind of completion phase. My patient may have days before the transformation becomes irreversible." Daniel climbed the stairs silently, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to avoid the pressure-sensitive steps that would have announced his presence to anyone monitoring the building's security systems. Outside Dr. Chen's office, he paused to listen. "Dr. Volkov, are you certain the treatment will work?" Dr. Chen asked. "Nothing is certain with this kind of biological modification," the other woman replied. "But if we can reach the subjects before the symbiotic organisms fully integrate with their nervous systems, there's a chance we can reverse the process." Daniel's enhanced hearing caught something else: the sound of vehicles moving into position. Outside the building, the operatives had realized the north side distraction was just that, and they were preparing to breach the medical center. He knocked gently on Dr. Chen's office door. "Sarah, it's Daniel Reeve. We need to talk." The door opened immediately, revealing Dr. Chen's surprised face. Behind her stood a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the same kind of intense, intelligent eyes that Daniel remembered from Dr. Petrov. "Daniel, I told you not to come back here." "It's not safe. I know. There's a kill team surrounding the building. We have maybe 5 minutes before they move in." The older woman stepped forward, studying Daniel with scientific fascination. "You must be one of the Nightshade subjects. I'm Dr. Elena Volkov. I've been waiting 15 years to meet you." Recognition hit Daniel like a physical blow. "You're Petrov's partner. You were at the facility in Romania. I was the lead researcher on Project BIOS. Alexei was brilliant, but he was also reckless. I tried to stop him from using American soldiers as test subjects, but by then the program had taken on a life of its own." Daniel could hear footsteps. In the building's main corridor, the operatives were inside. "Dr. Volkov, we need to leave. Now." "I can't leave," she said, gesturing toward a briefcase filled with medical equipment. "This contains the only existing samples of the neutralizing agent. If it's destroyed, the surviving subjects will have no hope of reversing their transformation. Then bring it with us." Dr. Chen was already gathering essential files from her desk. "Daniel, there's a service elevator at the end of the hall. It connects to the basement packing garage." "They'll have the garage covered," Daniel said, his enhanced hearing detecting the positioning of vehicles around the building. "Then we fire a way out," Dr. Volkov said matter-of-factly. "Dr. Chen tells me your enhanced capabilities are already manifesting. How much of your humanity are you willing to sacrifice to survive?" The question hit Daniel harder than he'd expected. Through the office window, he could see muzzle flashes as Maria engaged the operatives in the parking lot. Her enhanced reflexes allowed her to move between cover positions faster than normal human perception could track. But she was outnumbered, and eventually they would overwhelm her position. "All of it, if necessary," Daniel said. Dr. Volkov nodded approvingly. "Then you understand what Alexei was trying to create. Not just enhanced soldiers, but a new form of human being capable of surviving in an increasingly hostile world." I understand that innocent people are dying because of his experiments, and innocent people will continue dying unless we find a way to control what's been unleashed. The office door exploded inward as the operatives breached the room. Daniel moved without conscious thought, his enhanced reflexes engaging fully for the first time since the transformation began. The lead operative's rifle fire passed through empty air as Daniel crossed the distance between them in a fraction of a second. What happened next felt like watching someone else's actions from a distance. Daniel's transformed hands moved with impossible precision, disabling weapons and neutralizing threats with an efficiency that was both beautiful and terrifying. The operatives were skilled professionals, but they were facing something beyond their training or experience. In less than 30 seconds, 4 men lay unconscious on the floor, their weapons disabled and their tactical gear scattered across the room. Daniel stood among them, breathing normally despite the explosive violence, his enhanced physiology having barely registered the exertion. Dr. Chen stared at him with a mixture of awe and fear. "Daniel, what have you become?" "Something that can protect the people I care about," he said, though privately he wondered if that was still true. The violence had felt natural, efficient, almost pleasurable in a way that deeply disturbed his remaining human conscience. Dr. Volkov was studying him with scientific fascination. "Remarkable. The integration is proceeding faster than our models predicted. You're achieving capabilities that took the original test subjects weeks to develop. Is that good or bad? That depends on whether you can maintain cognitive control. As the process completes, the subjects who retained their human empathy became protectors. The ones who lost it became predators." Gunfire erupted from multiple locations around the building as more operatives moved into position. Maria's rifle answered from somewhere in the basement level, but Daniel could tell from the sound patterns that she was being forced deeper into the building's interior. "We need to reach Maria," Daniel said. "No," Dr. Volkov replied firmly. "We need to reach my laboratory. I have equipment there that can complete the neutralizing agent, but only if we can keep the samples viable for the next 6 hours." Daniel looked at Dr. Chen, seeing the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to save everyone, but the mathematics of the situation were clear. They could save the research or they could save Maria, but probably not both. "Where's your laboratory?" 40 miles north, hidden in an abandoned mining facility. "But Daniel, once we begin the neutralization process, there's no going back. You'll lose the enhanced capabilities, but you'll also lose any chance of using them to help your friend." Daniel felt the organisms beneath his skin pulsing with new urgency, as if they could sense the threat that the neutralizing agent represented. Part of him, a growing part, didn't want to give up the power he was gaining, but the sound of Maria's gunfire was growing more sporadic, and he knew she was running out of ammunition. The abandoned mining facility sprawled across 15 acres of West Virginia, mountainside like the skeleton of some massive industrial creature. Dr. Volkov led them through a maze of rusted equipment and collapsed buildings to a concealed entrance that descended deep into the mountain. The laboratory hidden below was a stark contrast to the decay above. Clean, well-lit, and filled with sophisticated biological research equipment. Daniel set Maria down carefully on an examination table. They had managed to extract her from the medical center, but not before she'd taken 2 rifle rounds to the chest. Her enhanced healing was already working to close the wounds, but she'd lost a dangerous amount of blood. "She survived," Dr. Volkov said after a quick examination. "The enhancement process includes accelerated healing and improved blood clotting. Give her a few hours and she'd be back on her feet." Daniel studied the laboratory while Dr. Volkov worked to stabilize Maria. The equipment was cutting edge, far beyond what a researcher in hiding should have been able to afford. Genetic sequencers, cellular fabrication units, even what appeared to be a quantum computer for biological modeling. "Dr. Volkov, how exactly have you been funding this research?" She paused in her work, her hand stilling over a tray of surgical instruments. "That's a complicated question, Daniel. I have time for a complicated answer." Dr. Chen had been quietly examining some of the research materials on a nearby workstation. She looked up suddenly, her face pale. "Daniel, these aren't just treatment protocols. These are enhancement procedures. Volkov isn't trying to cure the transformation. She's trying to perfect it." Daniel felt the organisms beneath his skin respond to his surge of adrenaline, their patterns flaring brighter as his enhanced senses focused on Dr. Volkov. He could smell her stress hormones, hear the acceleration of her heartbeat, detect the minute changes in her posture that indicated deception. "Dr. Volkov, what is this place really?" She straightened slowly, her elderly frame somehow seeming less frail than it had moments before. "This is the continuation of work that should never have been stopped. Daniel, what do you think you're becoming? A monster? A monster? No, you're becoming the next step in human evolution. The organisms you call parasites aren't foreign invaders. They're symbiotic partners, designed to unlock genetic potential that's been dormant in our species for thousands of years." Dr. Chen backed away from the workstation, her eyes wide with understanding. "You're not Elena Volkov. You're not even human, are you?" The woman they had known as Dr. Volkov smiled, and her appearance began to shift subtly. Her silver hair darkened to black, her aged features smoothing into those of a woman perhaps 40 years old. The patterns beneath her skin became visible, glowing with the same bioluminescence that marked Daniel and Maria, but far more advanced complex geometries that seemed to shift and evolve as they watched. "My name is Dr. Sarah Volkov, and I am the first successful subject of Project BIOS. I've been living among you for 23 years, studying, learning, preparing for the moment when the next generation of enhanced subjects would emerge." Daniel's enhanced reflexes brought him to full combat readiness in an instant, but Volkov raised a hand to stop him. "Daniel, I'm not your enemy. I've spent decades perfecting the enhancement process, removing the psychological instabilities that plagued the early subjects. You and Maria represent the culmination of that work. The other survivors, Rodriguez, Kim, Patterson, you killed them. I tried to save them, but they were from an earlier, flawed batch of organisms. Their enhancements were unstable, causing cellular breakdown and neurological damage. I gave them peaceful deaths rather than letting them suffer through the deterioration process." Maria stirred on the examination table, her enhanced healing having progressed enough to restore consciousness. "Volkov, I should have known. You've been monitoring us," Daniel realized. "Guiding the process, controlling the timing of our activation. Someone had to. The original protocol called for all subjects to be terminated after 5 years, once the long-term effects became clear. But I couldn't allow that to happen, not when you represented the successful evolution of the process." Dr. Chen had been quietly moving toward the laboratory's emergency exit, but Volkov's enhanced senses tracked her movement effortlessly. "Dr. Chen, please don't leave. You're an essential part of this process. Your medical expertise has been invaluable. In monitoring Daniel's transformation, you've been using me. I've been protecting you. The cleanup teams would have eliminated you weeks ago if I hadn't been providing them with false information about your research." Daniel felt a cold fury building in his chest, the enhanced aggression that came with his transformation, threatening to overwhelm his remaining human restraint. "You manipulated everything. Dr. Chen's involvement, Maria's research, even our escape from the medical center. I created the conditions necessary for your successful enhancement. The stress, the danger, the emotional connections, all of it was designed to guide your transformation along optimal pathways." Maria struggled to sit up on the examination table, her wounds still healing, but her enhanced strength already returning. "Volkov, what's the endgame here? What do you really want?" Volkov activated a wall display that showed a global map marked with hundreds of red pins. There are potential enhancement subjects scattered across every continent. Soldiers who were exposed to various iterations of the BIOS organisms during classified operations spanning 3 decades. Most remain dormant, but with the right stimuli, they could be activated. You want to create an army of enhanced humans. I want to save our species. Daniel, Maria, look at what you've become. Faster, stronger, more resilient than baseline humans. Enhanced healing, improved cognitive function, sensory capabilities beyond normal human range. You represent the next step in human evolution. At what cost? Dr. Chen asked. The psychological changes, the loss of empathy, have been largely eliminated in the current iteration. Daniel, have you experienced any reduction in your emotional capacity? Any decrease in your concern for others? Daniel wanted to say yes to deny the effectiveness of her process, but he couldn't. Despite the physical transformation, despite the enhanced aggression and predatory instincts, he still cared about protecting innocent people. His human empathy had not only survived the enhancement, it had been amplified along with his other capabilities. The choice is yours, Volkov continued. You can allow me to complete the process, becoming fully integrated enhanced humans capable of protecting and guiding baseline humanity through the challenges ahead. Or you can fight the transformation, experiencing the same cellular breakdown that killed your teammates. There's a third option, Maria said quietly. We can kill you and end this entire program. Volkov's smile was sad rather than threatening. You could try, but I've had 23 years to perfect my enhancements. And there are others like me, earlier subjects, who survived the initial trials and have been working to guide this process toward a successful conclusion. Daniel looked at Dr. Chen, seeing the fear and confusion in her eyes. She had wanted to help him, but now she was trapped in the middle of something far larger and more complex than a simple medical mystery. How many others? 7 of us remained. From the original trials. We call ourselves the first generation. You and Maria are the beginning of the second generation enhanced humans who retain full emotional capacity while gaining capabilities that baseline humans cannot match. The laboratory's alarm system suddenly activated, red lights flashing as motion sensors detected activity in the tunnels leading to the facility. The cleanup teams, Dr. Chen said. No, Volkov replied, checking a monitor that showed the tunnel. Approaches. These are my associates. The other members of the first generation, coming to witness your final transformation. Daniel felt the organisms beneath his skin respond to his spike in adrenaline, their bioluminescent patterns shifting into configurations he'd never seen before. Whatever was about to happen, his body was preparing for it at a cellular level. Daniel, Maria said, her voice carrying the weight of their shared military experience, we need to make a choice. Trust her and become something beyond human understanding, or fight our way out and probably die in the process. Through the laboratory's reinforced windows, Daniel could see figures moving through the forest outside. 7 people who moved with the same enhanced grace that marked Volkov's movements. The first generation come to collect their successors. The moment of choice had arrived. The 7 figures entered the laboratory like shadows made flash, their movements so fluid and coordinated that they seemed to share a collective consciousness. Each bore the same enhanced features that marked Volkov, the bioluminescent patterns. Beneath their skin, the predatory grace, the eyes that reflected light like those of nocturnal hunters. Daniel's enhanced senses cataloged each newcomer automatically. 3 men, 4 women, ages appearing to range from 30 to 50, though he suspected their true ages were significantly older. They wore simple clothing, but their bearing suggested military or intelligence backgrounds. Most importantly, they moved with the absolute confidence of apex predators who had never encountered anything capable of threatening them. The second generation, one of them said, studying Daniel and Maria with scientific interest. He was tall and lean, with silvering hair and scars that spoke of extensive combat experience. They're more advanced than we expected. The enhancement protocols have been refined considerably since our time, Volkov replied. Their integration is proceeding at an optimal rate. Maria had managed to stand, her wounds now little more than faint marks on her skin. Her enhanced healing was remarkable, but Daniel could see the exhaustion in her posture. The rapid cellular regeneration came at a metabolic cost. Dr. Volkov, Daniel said carefully, what exactly are you proposing? She gestured toward a complex device that dominated one corner of the laboratory, something that looked like a medical scanner crossed with a quantum computer. Final integration. The organisms in your system are currently in a transitional state, partially bonded with your cellular structure, but not yet fully integrated. The process can be completed artificially, guaranteeing successful transformation without the risk of rejection or breakdown. And if we refuse, then you face the same fate as your teammates. The organisms will attempt to complete integration naturally, but without proper guidance, the failure rate is approximately 70%. Dr. Chen had been studying the integration device with growing alarm. This isn't medical treatment, it's genetic rewriting on a fundamental level. You're talking about altering their entire cellular structure. Evolution is rarely a gentle process, one of the other first-generation subjects observed. She was a small woman with intense dark eyes and patterns beneath her skin that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. But the alternative is extinction. Extinction of what? Maria asked. Baseline humanity. The tall man replied. Dr. Chen, you're a physician. You've seen the statistics rising cancer rates, environmental toxins, genetic disorders that increase with each generation. Humanity as it exists now is approaching an evolutionary dead end. So you've decided to play God and force the next step. We've decided to ensure that our species survives the challenges ahead. Enhanced healing, improved cognitive function, sensory capabilities that allow us to perceive environmental threats that baseline humans cannot detect. These aren't just advantages. They're necessities for long-term survival. Daniel felt the organisms beneath his skin responding to the proximity of the first-generation subjects. The bioluminescent patterns were becoming more complex, forming connections and pathways that seemed to be preparing for some kind of neural linking. You want us to join some kind of collective consciousness, he realized. Not collective, Volkov corrected. Coordinated. Enhanced humans working together toward common goals, sharing information and resources in ways that baseline humans cannot achieve. Like a hive mind. Like a family. Daniel, you've experienced the enhanced empathy that comes with the transformation. Imagine the connection expanded to include others like yourself, the ability to truly understand another person's thoughts and motivations, to work together without the miscommunications and conflicts that plague baseline human relationships. Maria moved closer to Daniel, her enhanced senses clearly detecting the same neural preparation that he felt in his own system. Danny, they're not giving us a choice. The organisms are responding to their presence automatically. She was right. Daniel could feel his enhanced physiology preparing for some kind of integration process, as if the proximity of the first-generation subjects was triggering pre-programmed biological responses. His heartbeat was synchronizing with theirs, his breathing patterns matching their rhythms. Dr. Chen, he said urgently, the emergency exit. Can you reach it? I don't think so, she replied, nodding toward the first-generation subjects who had positioned themselves to block all possible escape routes. Daniel, what's happening to you? The patterns beneath Daniel's skin were now glowing brightly enough to be visible through his clothing. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced, not painful, but intensely present, as if every cell in his body was awakening to new possibilities. "The final phase," Volkov explained, her voice carrying a note of genuine excitement. "Your organisms are recognizing the presence of fully integrated subjects and preparing to complete their own bonding process. You have perhaps 10 minutes before the integration becomes irreversible. Unless we use the integration device to guide the process safely," the tall man added. "Without proper management, natural integration has a high probability of neurological damage." Daniel looked at Maria and saw his own conflict reflected in her eyes. The power they were gaining was intoxicating enhanced strength, speed, healing, sensory perception beyond anything baseline humans could achieve. But the cost was their fundamental humanity, their individual identity potentially subsumed into something larger and more alien. "There's something you're not telling us," Maria said suddenly. "The other test subjects, the ones who supposedly died from rejection, what really happened to them?" The first-generation subjects exchanged glances, a moment of silent communication that confirmed Daniel's suspicions about their enhanced coordination abilities. "They chose to fight the process," Volkov said finally. "And when enhancement fails, the results are ... unpleasant. Show us." Volkov activated another wall display, this one showing medical footage that made Daniel's enhanced senses recoil in revulsion. Bodies twisted by cellular breakdown, nervous systems that had been overloaded by incompatible biological modifications. Subjects who had clearly suffered extended agony before death finally claimed them. "This is what happens when the organisms attempt integration with subjects who resist the process," she explained. "The cellular structure breaks down, the nervous system overloads, and death occurs within 72 hours. Dr. Chen studied the footage with professional detachment, though Daniel could see the horror in her expression. "You're threatening them. Submit to your process or die in agony." "I'm showing them reality," Volkov replied. "The enhancement process has reached a critical threshold in both subjects. They can accept guided integration and become something magnificent, or they can fight it and suffer the consequences of biological incompatibility." Daniel felt his enhanced senses expanding even further, picking up electromagnetic signatures from the laboratory equipment, detecting trace chemicals in the air that revealed the emotional states of everyone in the room. The first-generation subjects were excited, anticipatory. Dr. Chen was terrified but determined. Maria was calculating, looking for tactical advantages that probably didn't exist. "What about her?" Daniel asked, nodding toward Dr. Chen. "What happens to baseline humans in your new world order?" "They become a protected species," the small woman with dark eyes replied. "Cared for, guided, but no longer responsible for making decisions that affect the survival of the species. Slaves. Children. Baseline humans have the emotional maturity and decision-making capacity of children compared to enhanced subjects. We would treat them with the same care and protection." Maria moved slightly, positioning herself for what Daniel recognized as a combat stance. "That's not acceptable." "Your acceptance isn't required," the tall man said calmly. "The process will complete regardless of your cooperation. The only variable is whether you experience it as transformation or dissolution." Daniel looked at the integration device, noting the way its quantum processors seemed to resonate with the patterns beneath his skin. If Volkov was telling the truth, it represented their only chance of surviving the enhancement process with their individual consciousness intact. But using it would also complete their transformation into something beyond human. "Dr. Chen," he said quietly, "if we do this, if we become what they want us to become, will you help us remember who we were?" She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Daniel, I can't stop this process. I don't have the knowledge or the equipment. But I can promise you that I'll remember who you were, and I'll do everything in my power to help you hold onto your humanity." The patterns beneath Daniel's skin were now pulsing in perfect synchronization with those of the first-generation subjects. The sensation was becoming overwhelming, as if his entire nervous system was being rewritten at the cellular level. "Maria," he said, "what's your call?" She studied the integration device for a moment, then looked at the first-generation subjects surrounding them. "I think we're past the point of having choices. But Danny, if we're going to become something else, let's make sure we become something that protects people, like Dr. Chen, instead of ruling over them." Volkov smiled, and for the first time, Daniel detected genuine warmth in the expression. "That's exactly what I was hoping you would say." The psychological profiles suggested you would retain your protective instincts, but confirmation is always reassuring. You've been testing us this entire time. Every enhanced subject must prove their suitability for integration. The process selects for individuals with strong moral foundations and protective instincts. Subjects who show signs of predatory behavior or sociopathic tendencies are redirected. Daniel thought about the footage of the failed integrations, understanding now that those subjects hadn't died from biological rejection. They had been eliminated because they failed psychological evaluation. "How many people have you killed to perfect this process?" "Far fewer than would die if humanity continues on its current evolutionary path," the tall man replied. "Climate change, resource depletion, genetic degradation baseline humans have perhaps 2 centuries before a complete civilizational collapse. We're offering a path to survival." The integration device was now humming with increasing energy, its quantum processors apparently responding to the enhanced subject's proximity. Daniel could feel it calling to the organisms in his system, offering completion and stability. "Dr. Volkov," he said, "if we agree to integration, what guarantees do we have that you won't use our enhanced capabilities for purposes we find morally objectionable?" "None," she replied honestly. "But Daniel, consider your alternative. You can die in agony over the next 3 days, or you can become something capable of protecting the people and values you care about. The choice is yours, but you have perhaps 5 minutes before the biological processes make it for you." Maria gripped Daniel's hand, and he felt their enhanced nervous systems creating a temporary link. For a moment, he could sense her thoughts. Directly her fear, her determination, her deep concern for the baseline humans who would be affected by their decision. "Together?" she asked. Daniel looked at Dr. Chen one more time, memorizing her face, her courage, her determination to help even when she was clearly terrified. "Together," he agreed. They moved toward the integration device, and Daniel felt the organisms beneath his skin respond with what could only be described as joy. The transformation was no longer a threat. It was a promise of power that could be used to protect the innocent and challenge those who would exploit them. As the device activated, bathing them in energies that resonated with every cell in their bodies, Daniel held on to one thought. Whatever he became, he would not forget the woman who had risked everything to help a patient she barely knew. The integration process began. The integration device enveloped Daniel and Maria in a field of energy that seemed to resonate with every molecule in their bodies. The sensation was unlike anything Daniel had experienced, not painful, but intensely transformative, as if his entire cellular structure was being rewritten in real time. Through the energy field, he could see Dr. Chen watching with a mixture of fascination and horror. The first-generation subjects stood in a circle around the device, their own bioluminescent patterns pulsing in harmony with the integration process. Volkov monitored the readings on multiple screens, occasionally making adjustments to ensure optimal transformation parameters. "Neural pathways integrating successfully," she announced. "Cellular bonding at 93% and rising. Both subjects are responding well to the enhancement protocols." Daniel felt his consciousness expanding in ways that defied description. His enhanced senses, which had seemed overwhelming before, now integrated seamlessly with his perception of reality. He could feel Maria's presence not just physically, but mentally, their enhanced nervous systems, creating a temporary link that allowed them to share thoughts and emotions directly. Are you still you? Maria's thoughts reached him without words. I think so. Are you? Yes, but more. Daniel, I can sense all of them. The first-generation subjects, even Dr. Chen to some extent. This isn't just enhancement, it's connection. The energy field around them intensified, and Daniel felt the final barriers between his original biology and the symbiotic organisms dissolving. The process should have been terrifying, but instead, it felt like coming home, as if his body had been incomplete until this moment. Integration complete, Volkov announced. Both subjects have achieved full symbiotic bonding with minimal psychological disruption. The energy field dissipated, and Daniel opened eyes that now perceived reality with crystalline clarity. Every detail of the laboratory was visible simultaneously. The molecular structure of the walls, the electromagnetic signatures of the equipment, even the subtle bioelectric fields generated by the other people in the room. Maria stood beside him, and Daniel could see that her transformation had progressed even further than his own. The patterns beneath her skin now formed complex geometric designs that seemed to shift and evolve as they watched. Her eyes held depths that spoke of enhanced cognitive capacity far beyond baseline human intelligence. How do you feel? Dr. Chen asked, approaching them cautiously. Complete, Daniel replied, surprised by the harmony in his voice. The words seemed to resonate with frequencies that baseline human hearing couldn't detect. For the first time in my life, I feel complete. Volkov smiled with maternal pride. The integration was perfect. Both subjects have retained full emotional capacity while gaining enhanced physical and mental capabilities. You represent the successful future of human evolution. Daniel looked at his hands, noting that his fingernails now had a crystalline structure that could probably cut through steel. His enhanced senses detected atmospheric changes that suggested weather patterns 3 days in advance. Most remarkably, he could feel the presence of every living thing within a 5-mile radius, a constant awareness of the biological web that connected all life. The others, Maria said, her voice carrying the same harmonic resonance as Daniel's. Rodriguez, Kim, Patterson, they didn't have to die, did they? The tall first-generation subjects stepped forward. They chose to resist integration. Their psychological profiles indicated they would not have adapted well to enhanced capabilities. Determination was ... merciful. You murdered them because you thought they wouldn't meet your standards. We prevented them from becoming threats to both enhanced and baseline humans. Daniel, Maria, you must understand that enhanced capabilities without proper psychological foundation create monsters. We learned that lesson during our own integration period. Daniel felt a cold fury building in his enhanced consciousness, but it was different from baseline human anger. This was precise, calculated, and absolutely focused. You've been playing God with human lives for over 2 decades. We've been ensuring that human evolution proceeds along optimal pathways, Volkov replied. But now that task can be shared. The second generation will help guide the emergence of enhanced humans across the globe. What if we refuse? The first-generation subjects exchanged those silent communications that spoke of their neural coordination. The small woman with dark eyes spoke for the group. Then you'll be treated as rogue-enhanced subjects. Your capabilities make you too dangerous to exist without oversight. Daniel felt Maria's thoughts merge with his own, and together they assessed the tactical situation. 7 first-generation subjects with decades of experience versus 2 newly integrated second-generation subjects. The odds weren't favorable, but their enhanced capabilities were still developing, still revealing new possibilities. The device, Maria's thoughts suggested. If we can overload the integration systems, we might be able to escape. And Dr. Chen? We protect her. Whatever we've become, We don't abandon the people who helped us. Daniel looked at Dr. Chen, seeing the fear and determination in her expression. She had risked everything to help them, and now she was trapped in the middle of a conflict between different generations of enhanced humans. "Dr. Volkov," he said aloud, "you're right about one thing. Enhanced capabilities do require proper psychological foundation. But your foundation is built on murder and manipulation. Our foundation is built on survival," she replied. "And if you can't accept that, then you've just proven that the integration process failed." The laboratory's alarm systems suddenly activated, but this time the threat wasn't coming from outside. Daniel's enhanced senses detected massive energy build-up in the integration device. It was overloading, either from the stress of the double integration or from deliberate sabotage. The moment of truth had arrived. The integration device erupted in a cascade of quantum energy that sent shockwaves through the underground laboratory. Daniel's enhanced reflexes moved him and Dr. Chen to safety in a blur of motion that the first-generation subjects barely had time to register. Maria simultaneously disabled 3 of them with precise strikes that targeted pressure points only enhanced senses could detect. "The quantum cascade will destabilize the entire facility," Volkov shouted over the alarms. "We need to evacuate immediately." But Daniel's enhanced perception had detected something else in the energy patterns emanating from the overloading device. A deliberate signature that suggested the overload hadn't been accidental. Someone sabotaged it. Maria's thoughts reached him. One of the first-generation subjects wanted this to happen. The tall man with silver hair was moving toward a concealed exit, his enhanced speed carrying him across the laboratory faster than baseline human eyes could track. The Daniel's enhanced vision caught the satisfied expression on his face, the subtle signs of someone whose plan was proceeding exactly as intended. "Colonel Webb," Daniel called, the name emerging from suppressed memories triggered by his enhanced cognitive capacity. "I should have recognized you sooner." Marcus Webb paused at the exit, his enhanced features shifting into a cold smile. "Hello, Danny. It's been a long time since Romania. You were our commanding officer. You led us into that facility knowing what would happen to us. I led you into a necessary sacrifice. Operation Nightshade required test subjects with specific psychological profiles, soldiers trained to follow orders and protect others, even at the cost of their own lives." Volkov stared at Webb with something approaching horror. "Marcus, you've activated the Cascade Protocol. The entire research program will be destroyed." "The research program has served its purpose," Webb replied. "We now have enhanced subjects with the capabilities we need and the psychological conditioning to follow orders. The first generation has become too independent, too concerned with protecting baseline humans." The laboratory shuddered as the quantum cascade spread to other systems. Ceiling panels crashed down around them, and the air filled with the acrid smell of burning electronics. Daniel's enhanced senses detected structural failures throughout the facility. They had minutes at most before complete collapse. "Dr. Chen, can you reach the surface?" he asked. "I think so, but what about, we'll be right behind you." "Go." Dr. Chen ran for the emergency exit, while Daniel and Maria faced the remaining first-generation subjects. The quantum cascade had disrupted their enhanced coordination abilities, leaving them momentarily vulnerable to attack. Maria moved with fluid precision, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to engage 3 opponents simultaneously. Her strikes were surgical, designed to disable rather than kill, a choice that spoke to her retained humanity despite the radical enhancement. Daniel found himself facing Volkov and 2 other first-generation subjects. The older woman's enhanced capabilities were formidable, but decades of hidden research had left her less prepared for direct combat than the military-trained subjects. "Daniel, you don't understand what you're destroying," she said, her enhanced voice carrying harmonic frequencies designed to induce compliance. The research data, the enhancement protocols, without them, no new subjects can be safely integrated. Maybe that's for the best. And when baseline humanity faces extinction, from environmental collapse or genetic degradation, when they need enhanced capabilities to survive. Daniel paused, his enhanced cognitive capacity processing the implications. Volkov was right about humanity's long-term challenges, but her methods have been built on murder and deception. Then, we'll find another way. A way that doesn't require sacrificing innocent people for the greater good. The facility shuddered again, more violently this time. Daniel's enhanced senses detected massive structural failures approaching the laboratory level. The quantum cascade had triggered a chain reaction that would bring down the entire mountain. Facility.Webb had vanished through his concealed exit, leaving the others to face the consequences of his betrayal. The remaining first-generation subjects were regrouping, their enhanced capabilities making them dangerous opponents even in the deteriorating conditions. But Maria's thoughts reached Daniel with a tactical insight that changed everything. The cascade isn't just destroying the facility, it's disrupting their neural coordination. They're operating as individuals now, not as a coordinated group. Daniel engaged the closest first-generation subject, a woman whose enhanced strength nearly matched his own. But his military training, combined with newly integrated enhanced reflexes, gave him the advantage he needed. The fight was brief and decisive. Volkov made one final attempt to salvage her life's work, racing toward a data storage system that contained decades of research. But the quantum cascade reached the storage unit first, wiping terabytes of enhancement protocols and integration procedures in a burst of electromagnetic energy. 40 years of research, she whispered, watching her life's work disappear. 40 years of playing God with human lives, Daniel replied. Maybe it's time to let humanity choose its own evolution. The ceiling began collapsing in earnest, massive concrete sections crashing down around them. Daniel grabbed Volkov's arm, despite everything she'd done. His enhanced empathy wouldn't allow him to leave her to die, even after learning the truth about her methods. Together, he and Maria fought their way toward the surface, carrying the woman who had created them and the secrets that died with her research. Behind them, the laboratory that had promised to guide human evolution collapsed into quantum fire and rubble. The second generation had survived, but the future they would create remained unwritten. 6 months later, Daniel stood on the ridge above his old cabin, watching the sunrise paint the Appalachian Mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The peaceful sanctuary he built after leaving the military was gone, destroyed in a government cover-up that blamed a gas leak for the explosion that had leveled 3 acres of mountainside. But the view remained unchanged, and the morning mist still clung to the valleys like a familiar embrace. His enhanced senses detected Dr. Chen's approach long before she reached the ridge. She climbed the mountain trail with steady determination, carrying a thermos of coffee and the morning newspapers that had become part of their weekly ritual. "Any regrets?" she asked, settling beside him on the fallen log that served as their meeting place. Daniel considered the question while studying his reflection in the thermos's polished surface. The bioluminescent patterns beneath his skin had stabilized into subtle geometries that were visible only in dim light. His enhanced capabilities remained fully functional strength, speed, healing, and sensory perception that bordered on supernatural. But 6 months of careful practice had taught him to use them with restraint. About the transformation? No. About the people we couldn't save? Every day. The congressional hearings had lasted 3 months, generating headlines about biological weapons programs and unauthorized human experimentation that had shocked even Washington's cynical political establishment. Daniel and Maria's testimony supported by the evidence they'd gathered about Operation Nightshade, had led to the termination of 7 classified research programs and prosecution of dozens of military and civilian officials. Colonel Webb remained missing, presumably dead in the laboratory collapse, though Daniel's enhanced senses sometimes detected traces of his presence in intercepted communications and surveillance reports. The man who had orchestrated their transformation had vanished into the shadows of the intelligence community, but his work continued to affect their lives. The memorial dedication is next week, Dr. Chen said, unfolding a newspaper to show an article about the monument being erected in Daniel's hometown. Will you attend? I don't think so. Too many questions about how I survived when the others didn't. The memorial would honor Rodriguez, Kim, Patterson, and the dozens of other soldiers who had died as test subjects in various biological weapons programs. Their families would finally have official recognition of their sacrifice, along with financial compensation that seemed inadequate for the loss of their loved ones. Maria approached through the forest, her enhanced movement creating barely a whisper of disturbance among the fallen leaves. She had adapted to the transformation with characteristic efficiency, using her enhanced capabilities to work with international human rights organizations investigating similar programs in other countries. Any word from Volkov? Daniel asked. She's been cleared for release from protective custody next month, Maria replied. Apparently, her cooperation with the investigation has been valuable enough to warrant immunity from prosecution. Dr. Elena Volkov, they had learned her real identity during the hearings, had spent the last 6 months in federal protection, sharing everything she knew about biological enhancement programs spanning 4 decades. Her testimony had exposed a web of international cooperation between defense contractors, government agencies, and rogue scientists that stretched across multiple continents. She wants to continue the research, Dr. Chen said. Legally this time, with proper oversight and voluntary subjects. What do you think? Daniel asked. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, studying the newspaper, articles about genetic therapies and enhancement technologies that were beginning to emerge from legitimate research institutions. I think the genie is out of the bottle. The technology exists, and eventually someone will use it. The question is whether we can guide the development toward beneficial applications rather than weapons programs. Daniel's enhanced senses detected a shift in the wind patterns that suggested rain within the hour. Storm clouds were building beyond the western ridges, moving toward them with the slow inevitability of natural forces. I've been thinking about what comes next, he said. The enhanced capabilities we have, they come with responsibilities. What kind of responsibilities? There are probably other test subjects out there. People who were exposed to various enhancement programs over the years and don't know what's happening to them. They'll need help, guidance, protection from people who would exploit their condition. Maria nodded. I've identified at least 12 potential cases in the past month. Veterans who are experiencing unexplained physical changes showing up in emergency rooms with conditions that don't match any known medical conditions. Are you suggesting we become some kind of enhanced human support network? I'm suggesting we use our capabilities to help people, the same way Dr. Chen helped us. Dr. Chen smiled, the expression carrying warmth that reminded Daniel why he had fought so hard to protect her during the laboratory confrontation. You know, for people who were worried about losing their humanity during the enhancement process, you've retained more empathy and moral clarity than most baseline humans manage. The first drops of rain began falling, creating patterns on the forest floor that Daniel's enhanced vision could track in perfect detail. Soon, the storm would drive them to shelter, but for now, they sat together in comfortable silence. 3 people whose lives had been forever changed by a conspiracy that had finally been exposed to daylight. Daniel thought about the choices that lay ahead. He could return to solitude, using his enhanced capabilities to live a quiet life apart from the complications of human society. Or he could embrace the responsibility that came with power, working to protect others who faced the same challenges that had nearly destroyed him. The decision wasn't difficult. Dr. Chen had risked everything to help a patient she barely knew. Maria had sacrificed her own safety to ensure that the truth about Operation Nightshade would be revealed. Their example had shown him that enhanced capabilities meant nothing without the human connections that gave them purpose. As the rain intensified, Daniel stood and offered his hand to help Dr. Chen to her feet. Together, the three of them made their way down the mountain trail toward whatever challenges awaited them, knowing that they faced them not as isolated individuals, but as family. The transformation was complete, but the real work was just beginning.